Welcome to the Wisdom Seat podcast. In this episode, Michael Carroll sat down with Chris Kayser, an actor in the Atlanta area for over 40 years. At the time of this recording, Chris had recently performed in a play about death and had been coming to terms with his own cancer diagnosis. He and Michael discussed how both acting and death can bring us vividly into the present and the role that mindfulness plays on the stage and in life. Chris passed away in December of 2024, leaving behind a remarkable legacy in the Atlanta theater community. This episode was originally produced by Applied Mindfulness Training as part of their Mindful Voices series, and we're grateful for their partnership in sharing it here. You can learn more about their work at appliedmindfulnesstraining.org.
Hey, Chris.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning to you. Well, first off, Chris, thank you. Thank you for being here. And I want to welcome you. I also want to thank Applied Mindfulness and also thank the audience who's chosen to take some time with us today. So thank you for being here. As you may know, what this podcast is about is really being in conversation with men and women who are practitioners of applied mindfulness, mindfulness awareness meditation. And also, how does that work in our lives? You know, whether raising children, being an actor in this case, which we'll explore with you, or a truck driver, or a scientist, or whatever. So that's kind of the thrust of it. And we'll get into your experience in mindfulness awareness meditation. But I have to tell you, before I jump into all of that, there's looking at your background, I know for the audience will say something, but you're quite a successful actor in the Atlanta area and been doing it for 30 years. So, I mean, to me, that's 40 years.
40 plus years, yes. I always said that acting was like driving one of those old school Cadillacs, where you go to the gas station and you fill up your tank, and then as you're leaving the gas station, you have to start looking for another gas station because, it's not going to last long. It's sort of an evanescent quality to it.
Well, at least you're driving in class. You see that?
Right. For a little while, anyway.
That's right, for a little while. But before we jump into the topic, so to speak, is I was reading your background and how you came to be an actor. I mean, that's kind of remarkable. I mean, if I heard it correctly, that you had to fill in suddenly for someone. You never took an acting class. You haven't since. And how? I mean, please help us understand how did that happen?
Well, chercher la femme. I was dating this woman who was a beautiful woman, just graduated from the University of Georgia with a theater degree. And I was just driving her around, and she said, well, to auditions and stuff. And she said, well, you ought to audition. I just thought, you're crazy. I don't know anything about this. So she had the job, but she had a job at a little dinner theater. It's now gone, the Barn Dinner Theater in Marietta, and they're doing an old chestnut comedy, and she was the ingenue. But the male ingenue playing opposite her had left because he got a better job. So the director and I and this woman are sitting there, and he's calling people. He can't get anybody. He's just frustrated enough. He looks up, he says, what about you? He shoves the script across his table. I don't know anything about it, but I could read. So I read, and he said, well, you're boyfriend and girlfriend, so there'll be some chemistry, and it's not that hard. I'm gonna show you what to do, and I'm gonna pay you $50 a week. And I was thrilled. I said, oh my gosh, I'm a professional actor, So
what year is this? What year is this?
This is in the late 70s.
Okay, got it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just bit in that way, and so. And then I started learning monologues and thinking I'm going to go to auditions and that'll be my theater, and if I ever get hired, that'll just be gravy. And so, I was fortunate to get hired a couple of times. And then I was just the best student ever. I just watched the people who were good. And I studied, how did they approach text? How did they, relate with the other actors and with the director and their work habits? And so I just studied them and I wrote it all down. And so I just gained practical experience that way, just stumbled forward. And oh my gosh, when I got married, I said, I just said, I will, I'll never sacrifice my family on the altar of my art. And if I can't make it, I'm going to quit, And,
right.
But I kept going. So and here I am.
But what I mean, anything could have happened. Obviously, Chris, you could have walked into a tennis match, or you could have walked into a swimming club, but you walked in. What was it about acting that I mean, obviously it resonated with you. It touched some natural chord in you as an artist. What was it?
I remember my old friend of mine. We were talking. We were very young. We were thinking about what we're going to do with our lives, and he said, "I know you need a place where your talents can run rampant." And and that was sort of it. It's funny you mentioned tennis, because at that time when I was there, I was a tennis pro, and I play tournaments, and I would get nervous, and I would lose to people who couldn't play tennis as well as I could play tennis because I was just frozen. So, but then in the theater though, I would be nervous, but that would help to just invigorate me. And those nerves never defeated me. And I took that as a sign that this is what I should be doing. And then there's the whole, there's just the panoply of skills and, and challenges that the theater provides. And I just thought, this is rich. This is great. Plus it's literature, it's ideas, it's everything. So anyway.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up this sense of exposure and anxiety. Here you are, very talented tennis player, but at the critical point, there's a sense of uneasiness or anxiety that kind of you felt was kind of holding you back, or at least creating an obstacle. But here, if I heard you correctly, this obstacle became more of an invitation in the artistic expression than it was in the athletic expression.
Yeah, it was a spur. And so there's no question that you're putting yourself out there, that you're vulnerable. Because it's theater, all your mistakes are in. Everything that happens is in. They don't fix it in post-production. It's right there. And so, there's a sense of immediacy about it that I love, and a connection with the audience, and the sense of our storytelling. And I just fell in love with it, still in love with it, never bored. Yeah. So
that is so beautiful, because New York as an artistic city is an unforgiving place. It's just simple.
Yeah.
And many of my friends, when I moved there when I was 22, many of my friends were in the arts, and boy, it was in hard work getting and training themselves and everything. And yours sounds, I'm sure it was just as hard, but it seemed more romantic the way you kind of rolled into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe so. I never wanted to go to New York. I just thought that city would eat me up.
Yeah.
The way people struggle. Yeah, I heard a lot about it, and the way people struggled. And he said, "Oh, you have to give yourself 3 years before something might happen." And I don't want to wait around 3 years, wait tables and whatnot. So, and then of course once I had married and children, then just forget about it. Plus,
Of course.
that was sort of a cultural drain on the city. The idea was Atlanta at the time was a minor league town. The idea is to get good and leave. So, we needed good people to stay. And so the theater around me now is so much more rich than it was then. So.
Right. Well, great story. I just love that you kind of wandered, your artistic expression kind of wandered into an opportunity. That's beautiful.
Yes.
So let's now look at the parallel issue, which is, I think it's true for a lot of people who apply mindfulness in their world, is that there's also this other parallel. I mean, I'll speak for myself as a corporate executive. I was doing meditation parallel with me doing my corporate work, and how did it inform, my work? And there's a lot of artists who do meditation. At least I know some. Well, give us a little background on when meditation came in, what your relationship with meditation is, if you could.
Yeah, I always had kind of spiritual longings that were just ever present with me. When I was in high school, when I graduated from the 8th grade, then I went to a Benedictine monastery in Arkansas and joined the seminary. That I left after my high school years, but I still had a lot of sort of longing in me. And so in my 20s too, I investigated meditation. Then went to the Zen Center in Atlanta, also did the transcendental meditation kind of craze there. And then was very involved for a long time with the Catholic Church here, which I finally had sort of a violent rupture with them. But and then, so it's been like 6 years that I started really seriously meditating, and started at the Shambhala Meditation Center here in Detroit.
I see Shambhala. I see. Let's go back to the Benedictine thing.
Yeah.
I too grew up a Catholic, and you had my concerns and problems. Yet at the same time, I recall many of the elements of that upbringing, and still to this day, a very inspiring group of people in many ways. What did you learn in going to a Benedictine kind of seminary? What was it like?
It was great, frankly. And it wasn't because of them, that I left there. The idea was, I always had sort of an active imagination too. And I was so taken with the idea of eternity. And then that the nuns would tell me, a sparrow will land on Stone Mountain on New Year's Day and then leave. And when Stone Mountain is worn down to nothing by that sparrow, eternity will just be beginning. And I was just so taken by that. And then I'm thinking, my 8th grade self, that life is a test, and whether you spend, eternity in heaven or eternity in hell. And I said, I got to get to heaven, And so, but then I went to the monastery, and I realized a couple of things. One, that those men there are not trying to get around life and into heaven, which is sort of what I was doing. Right. And also that, life can come to visit you there in the monastery. You want to get in trouble, you can get in trouble there too. And these were mature men with a mature way of thinking and a love of God and work that shamed me a little bit. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm being so immature about this. I better get out into the world. And, if I come back, I come back. If I don't, I don't. So then finally I left. But it was great.
Yeah. I can see the enthusiasm in your face.
Yeah.
That notion of vastness, the eternity, I think for a lot, I know for me, but I hear it all the time. We all, as kids, kind of get a little glimpse of that, like when did the universe start? And now we know how big the thing is. This quality when we're kids that we go, whoa, what's going on here? I remember that, just very similar to you. The nuns would say stuff like that, like God is, bigger than the universe. I'd be like, whoa, that's possible?
Yeah. Yeah.
That freshness, I think, is good. It's wholesome. I think a lot of young people, a lot of children have that experience.
Yeah. When you're obviously your world expands as you get older, and then now it goes almost beyond your own imagination. We've all been sort of enlightened by those pictures of the new telescope. It's just mind blowing.
I mean, if you really take the context of our life, as human beings, if we're really honest, we're in the midst of 90 billion light year wide piece of space that's expanding. I mean, everybody should just take a deep breath on occasion. This is a serious, and then it's so intimate. This experience of being Chris or Michael or Bob, Sally. I mean, it's so intimate and vast simultaneously. It's, I guess that's why you and I practice, I suppose. I don't know.
Oh yeah, just trying to hold all that in your head, and just the idea of time passing and time being compressed. I had to laugh. I was watching this a Beatles documentary, and John Lennon said, he's always kind of pissy about stuff, and he says, well, I don't want to be singing "She Loves You" when I'm 30 years old. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
That's the young man talking.
That's right. All right. So then you moved over and you practiced Zen for a little while. And can you say a little bit about your experience of that?
I did that. I don't know how long I stayed with it. Maybe a year. I just kind of drifted away. But I had one weird. Well, I shouldn't say weird. I think of it as the only real religious experience of my life. I was just reading a book. It was called The Three Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau. There's a chapter in there, called Enlightenment Stories. So when I read that chapter, something happened to me. And it lasted for 3 days. And all I can say is that I was filled with love for those 3 days. And I looked at everybody differently. And I was a little estranged from my sister at the time. And I called up my sister and told her I loved her and, wished I saw her more and stuff. And then 3 days later, kind of fades away, and it's gone. And in an attempt much later, in an attempt to recapture that experience, I read that book again, that chapter. Didn't happen.
That's right. Yeah. It's too fresh. It's like making a beautiful cake. You can't make the cake again. It's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because this, as I've gotten older, trying to sort of investigate this notion of becoming fully realized human being, which is kind of at the core of the meditation, so to speak. It's interesting. I forget who told me this. Many years ago, I was talking to a Tibetan teacher, and he mentioned that there is a teaching that when the Buddha, as a young man, there's a story where he was a young boy, and it was springtime, and he went out to sit underneath a tree and watch this field where they were plowing the field, preparing it for seeding it. And it was a beautiful day, and he was sitting there, and he looked out, and it was a sharp, clear, luminous day, and he awoke. He woke up, and in the process, he realized that all the little animals that were being harmed by the plowing, all the little bugs and worms, and his heart broke. And he felt enormous love and kindness and compassion toward all beings. And this Lama was telling me the story because he said that it was at that point that the Buddha became fully enlightened.
Oh.
And it was...
I've never heard that story.
Right. And it was after that, all the Buddha did is spend his time deconstructing, pretending otherwise.
Oh, good grief. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I've been contemplating that for a long time because I think what you just described, Chris, I think many human beings, many people in our audience have had an experience like that. Maybe not 3 days, maybe a little more fleeting. And, this journey is kind of getting out of our own way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Rather than sort of getting back to something or whatever. And that's a beautiful story. And, I hear such great stories. I remember reading Kapleau's book too. And a lot of people went, well, when I read Kapleau's book, I became a Buddhist the next day. It really was an influential book.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you practice Zen, and then you kind of you picked up the practice just 6 years ago. Is that correct? Is that?
Yes. After I left the Catholic Church, I thought I would go church shopping, frankly, but then I decided, suddenly I realized that I was sort of dogma averse. I don't want to hear just another version or anybody telling me they know God and what I'm, and what I'm supposed to be, what God wants me to do. I gravitated toward it because I still had the sense of worship, the sense of going outside myself by going in, as strange as that sounds, and also at the same time, nobody's talking to me.
Right.
Nobody's preaching at me. And I set off to find out things on my own, kind of. At one point, I had to laugh about this. I thought, well, I need to know more about Buddhism. So I saw they have a library up there at Shambhala, and there's this book, this tome. It says Buddhism Explained. I said, oh man, that's the book for me, So I started reading that book, and it is so dense, so difficult. And I said, I'm not getting this, but I'm not going to quit. I'm going to finish this book. So but right at the end, the guy says, you can't learn about Buddhism by reading. You have to just sit and meditate. And I wish you told me that 300 pages.
Yeah, but in the beginning, because right in the intro.
I know. So I tried, and so okay, I'm sitting, and I'm going to see what happens. So,
it reminds me, the book, what's it called? Buddhism for Dummies.
Yeah.
It's a really, really well written. Yeah, it's quite. They put a lot of discipline into it. Like Buddhism Explained. Well, thank you.
Right.
Someone's going to explain this to me, and But Buddhism for Dummies is pretty good. It does. If you ever want to go back,
I do want to go back, and that sounds much more my style, much more my level, frankly, than Buddhism Explained.
Right. Right. So you got back into the practice, and you've been doing it for 6 years.
Yes.
And what's your experience been with the practice?
I accuse myself all the time of being American, and the idea, and what I mean by that is that, the term ROI, certainly.
Sure.
Yeah, return on investment. What am I getting out of this? I just spent half an hour. So what did I, let me write down what. So, and that's sort of not the game, so I've had to convince myself of that, and call on my patience, and for me, it's been a way to really practice stillness. It's a way to practice not being buffeted by the the winds of your mind, which it still happens, and so. And not judging myself. I read Carroll Hammond's book, and Meeting Your Mind, and she suggested keeping a meditation journal. So I kind of don't want to show that book to Carroll, because every one it says, oh, chatty mind. Oh, I didn't have it today. Oh boy. So, but not to be discouraged, and that every in and out breath that I take without being invaded is kind of a victory and a little island of repose for myself. And the whole idea of sort of staying on task, but in a sort of effortless way, and that letting thoughts come and go as just unwelcome guests in your mind, that has come in a very specific way into my life. Sometimes, these rehearsals for plays, you've got a big job to do in a short time to do it. And, and everybody doesn't do it exactly my way. Everybody doesn't do it exactly just to convenience me. You can get a little annoyed. But then I just thought, well, that little annoyance thing, is that helping? And that thought is also just a thought that I can either hang on to, or I can let go of it and keep going and be present. So that has just really helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me repeat that back to you and then make an observation. So if I hear you correctly, one of the things that this practice has helped you understand is what I call distinguishing between a thought and an experience. In other words, you're able to not let thoughts give the impression that things ought to be otherwise, rather than how they are.
Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That's it. Yeah. Okay. Let me make an observation here about this ROI issue, because I think this is one of the critical missteps in popular mainstream, the popularization of the practice. not a misstep in the sense that everybody's bad who makes the misstep. I mean, we all make the same mistakes. Is that we do this practice, or a lot of people coming to the practice feel that by doing it, we can become a better version of ourselves. That we do it because, well, we want a quieter mind. We don't want to be as stressed out. We want to be better at our life. We want to be more compassionate.
Yeah, so what's wrong with that? Yeah.
This sounds good.
Sounds
exactly.
Good. Yeah.
And to a great degree, it's very admirable and worthy, so to speak.
You've seen the stream. You've seen the stream that says 10% happier. You've seen that?
Yes. And there's all and God bless them. I'm not here to sort of throw ironies,
yeah.
But there's even to the point where I was reading this very little mindfulness research uses really, really strict scientific experimental methodologies, meaning you have to have a control group, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that a lot of the research still isn't good. It's just that the very few uses those very disciplined scientific methodologies. There was one that did it, and they found really good results. And it was published in the New York Times. And, everyone was excited that, hey, we now have, real scientific data. And the scientist was talking about it. And the ending of the article was, now that we know that this practice actually can produce results, now we have to get to dosage. God. Meaning, how little do I have to do in order to get the goodies?
Right.
And if you really understand the practice as making friends with yourself, it would be like coming up to a friend and going, how little time do I have to spend with you in order to become friends?
Right.
It's just misunderstanding. But bottom line with this ROI thing, and then we'll get back to this conversation, is it's not this effort in the meditation is different than trying to get somewhere. It's how to be somewhere. And it's not about achieving, it's about expressing. There's qualities of who we are that we're expressing that we're overlooking. And it's becoming familiar with those qualities. And that effort of becoming familiar is much different than achieving. In modern society, as you and I have been brought up, maybe a little differently because we've been spiritually inclined, maybe more than most, I don't know, is effort's all about achieving stuff. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Whereas this form of effort is not about achieving anything at all. It's about becoming familiar with your experience.
That's right. And that is un-American.
Well, it's been un-American for quite some time, other than the fact that it keeps creeping up on everybody, which they refer to as suffering.
Yeah.
Right? It keeps speeding along until you get divorced, or until your friends won't return your call, or until you don't fit into your clothes anymore. You have to become familiar with your experience, right?
Yes.
So one way or another, you're going to become familiar with this experience, and getting that muscle to strengthen and be worthy of being human is I think where we're going in terms of non-ROI. But back to you. How does this practice now apply to this beautiful performance art discipline of being on the stage and portraying a character and creating beauty? How is it applied?
In the theater, we're always chasing that state where you are fully relaxed and yet full of energy. And that's a difficult thing to do, just be that little stasis in there of, fully alive, fully aware, fully, in conversation with your scene partner and with the audience. And there's a lot of things that can distract. I'm here to tell you that there have been times that I've done some bad acting where I'm I'm in the play, I'm saying those words, and there's over here is going, oh, how's my voice sound tonight? Oh, I should have combed my hair better. Something which is just, not being in the moment, obviously. So, I find that this mindfulness practice is a way of practicing that state where, there's no paying customers there, so I don't have to worry about that. I just try to, stay as present as I can. And I just think that's a really valuable thing.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. Let's go back to the tennis issue then. This ability to be synchronized, body, mind,
Yeah.
environment, where you're this whole trying to strategize and navigate yourself through the experience as an athlete or a human being or an artist, whatever, kind of falls away. And you're just there. You're just playing tennis.
Yeah.
Or you're climbing a tree. There's a little difference with acting, though, right? Because you're playing a role, which has to do somewhat to psychology of help me navigate that. I mean,
Yeah, I always find it interesting, just even the language around sports. When a guy is just, completely flowing, they describe that experience as, for instance, the ball slowing down or the ball gets bigger. And people say, oh, man, he is out of his mind right now. He just can't do anything wrong. And so there was a great book called The Zen of Tennis. And this guy was talking about the mental aspect of tennis. And he said a dirty trick to play on a guy like that is at the crossover, just in mild conversation, you say, man, Michael, you are serving so well today. You're really doing great. He said, how are you doing? Are you throwing the ball a little higher or are you getting your arm back? And if you can get that guy to think at all, then the phrase is, now I got in his head. Right. He was out of his mind, but now he's in his head and performance plummets. Right. So, yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's an old Musashi trick.
Oh, really?
Great samurai. Oh, yeah. Musashi, the great samurai, he would win the battle ahead of time emotionally. So that when he showed up, he had an emotional edge.
Mm-hmm.
So he would arrive late, or he would arrive at a place that he wasn't supposed to be, or he would create a scene prior to showing up to the samurai battle, to sort of win the emotional battle before he went into the actual battle. But back to this sense of presence as an actor.
Yes.
And as you said, fully alive, fully aware, fully in conversation. This, for us who don't act, it's one thing, like, for instance, being a teacher, right? It's similar in that you're fully there, fully aware, fully in conversation, fully present, but you're imparting knowledge rather than playing a role. You've done Shakespeare. My goodness, you're speaking in Shakespearean English. You're playing the role of the king. How help us understand how mindfulness, or how you think about mindfulness, how does that all work in terms of presence?
Yeah, there's a lot of prep before you get there, and the bottom rung is memorizing your lines, and then you start in rehearsal with a whole, another set of mistakes when you try to figure out where you're going to stand, or, the director's giving you ideas and comments, but eventually, you just have to be that person. And that's sort of the magic kind of, where you lock eyes with your scene partner and, you actually feel these things. You feel them in a really visceral way. You're not just making faces and talking loud anymore, like, here's this, it's kind of a dumb example, but, you know, that whole business of crying on stage. And I have not had a problem with that except for 2 times in these 40 years where, in both times, it was where you had to enter crying. So you don't have the benefit of the scene working up to it and seeing this person you love.
Right.
So anyway, I cheated both times. You know, Tiger Balm?
Yes.
The little tiger under my eyes, and it would just burn my eyes. And so it would come out, and I would be crying. I'm crying in the sense of there are tears coming down. Here's the weird part. Like that once you started crying, like the emotions then would follow.
Right.
And you're really crying. But you started by priming the pump. And that's obvious. I've only done it twice.
No, that's very cool. That's interesting. I mean, to me, this idea of inhabiting the character at a certain point where it shifts from, you know, learning your role, learning your costume, learning the stage placement, and it shifts to where it's organic, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and it reminds me of a friend of mine's a photographer, and at some point the camera becomes irrelevant. You know, like a lot of people learning to take photographs are fascinated with the camera, you know, with the lens, distance, with the lighting, all this kind of stuff. Well, at some point, what are you talking about? The camera is irrelevant. You know, the issue is being in the world, you know, being of the piece, you know?
Yeah. Well, I understand that completely. Yeah. And that, yes, it's just one other tool part of you. But what's really important is seeing and understanding what you're seeing and sort of being at one with that and how to best capture that. Oh, I get that completely. Yeah.
And then what you were saying earlier, Chris, is that the meditation, from your point of view, trains the mind to enter in more readily into that organic engagement, not get distracted by, you know, wondering if my camera is going to work, or you know, that you can actually engage the immediacy of the present.
Yeah. And it's, again, it's just acting, but, you know, it's all about being present. Yes, being absolutely present. And when you're absolutely present and your scene partners are absolutely present, you know, things can happen then, and they are real. As just strange as it's only a paper moon, but nonetheless, you're feeling it, and it's real. And I totally feel that you know, the mindfulness training is helpful in that, and you search for it, and you welcome it, and you nurture it, and boy, yeah, I'm going to keep going forever, as long as I can.
You know, it's interesting because, you know, as a practitioner, one of the things that I've discovered in doing the meditation is that 99 and 9/10% of who I am is present. You know, my earlobes aren't arguing with themselves. My hair is not arguing, wanting to be a truck or anything. It's like, you know, who I am, what I have to examine, is totally present. There's no option. It's just this one small part of me that keeps giving me the impression that I have an option, you know, to sort of step back and strategize. And as a meditator sitting on a cushion, you know, you can work with that dynamic and sort of drop it and let it find its place. But the role that you're doing is even making it more complicated, or more challenging, you know, because you're not only physically present, you get that. You're also playing with the internal presence of you as a being.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. You know, that's the famous acting phrase, what's my motivation? You know, the idea being that everybody wants something all the time. And so, you know, when you want it, you're in a real positive way, you're going action way, you're going after it. And what holds you back are the obstacles. So you're always looking for, what are the obstacles in the scene? And what is your strategy to overcome these obstacles to get what you want? So, yeah, you know, we're sort of always thinking about that. But when this mindfulness training is, you get to sort of stop that for a while, and yet,
that's right.
Yeah, that I'm not just, and that goes back to the ROI and the Americanism thing, that I just want to be, and I want to calm down, and I just want to be present. And,
It's cool. Well, let me ask you, we have about 15 minutes left, but let me ask you this. This is something that's always fascinated me with the performing arts, particularly acting on the stage. And it goes back to the notion of a teacher. When you're a teacher in a classroom, let's just say grade school teacher, you have an audience, which is
sure,
and there's a chemistry there where you're reading your audience as you're imparting knowledge. You can throw the ball back and forth. Whereas I've always felt that the relationship between the artist, the audience, and the performing artists when they're doing plays, there's more of a wall there. Wall is the wrong word, but there's, how do you work? The teacher can touch and feel and play, but you men and women are up there on the stage, and there seems to be a separation, but an intimacy simultaneously.
Yeah.
And say a little bit about that, if you could.
Well, I've done some film acting, not a whole lot, but it's a little hard to imagine, because so much of what theater is just that sharing this. We're in the same room and we're sharing the same air. And believe me, actors are aware and fed by the sense of the audience watching a story being told. And so, an easy example of that is laughter. They're really with it. They're really listening, and and you can hear them laughing. On the other end of the scale is that dead quiet when nobody's coughing, nobody's sniffling. It's just so quiet in there, and that it's a sign that and that's communication. The people are with you. They are in the present now too, and they know at the end of Hamlet there's bodies laying everywhere. They know everybody's going to get up and take the curtain call, for gosh sake. But at the same time, they are viscerally affected by the events of the play. Boy, that's a beautiful thing.
Well, that's great. So let me just see if I can repeat it. So what I heard you say is that the communication for a stage actor is very atmospheric.
Yeah.
Atmospheric. I mean, in a classroom, obviously it's atmospheric, but there's also all kinds of touch points. You can touch Bobby in the back room. There's Mary taking her notes, and it seems more granular in a classroom. Whereas here, you're touching a tone. It's like almost like a shapeless tone that you're working with.
Yeah. The teacher student, there's an obvious relation there, the master and the apprentice, the teacher and the student, which is not at play in the theater, where the phrase is the willful suspension of disbelief. We're inviting them into a world where they can, it's art. So, some people just, they don't, whatever you're doing, they don't dig it, and they can let you know. Where we all of us have had that experience of you say this joke which has always worked, and then all you hear are crickets.
That's right.
Yeah. So yes, it's and that's what like that's the terrible thing about cell phones. You enter into the world, and then a cell phone goes off, and that reminds everybody, oh, we're just watching.
Right, this is other world. Right.
Yeah, it just punctures that balloon that you've worked so hard to get up in the air and with them. Yeah. There's definitely yes, the tone thing is true.
And the reason why I brought up the teacher metaphor is because there's an imparting of meaning. When you go to a play, as we were talking about just prior to coming on, it was the Everybody play, which is about death. You're imparting meaning. You're shifting people's sense of who they are as a human being. changing us, in a profound way. And it's the same thing in the classroom. When you're a young child, I'm thinking about young child classrooms, so there's all kinds of classrooms. It shifts a child, changes who we are, creates meaning in our lives. So, that's very profound thing for a human being to do for one another. And as actors, that's what you do for us. You change us. You bring meaning into our lives, not just, jokes, but you shift us.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah. All we can do is offer. We can offer that to the audience, and it's up to them to take it or mold it or be affected by it, however they do. But we strive to do it the best we can. That's all.
Yeah. Well, let me just shift a little bit here. As we had said earlier, Chris, to be transparent with our audience, is that how old are you again, Chris? I'm sorry.
I'm about to be 73.
73.
Mm-hmm.
Wearing it well. I'm 68, so we're kind of the same cloth, so to speak. You sharing with the audience transparently is you are working now with overcoming cancer, and I'm just curious. I'm getting older too, and not that being old is the only issue, because it's true that death is something that's with all living beings. But as we get older, this death, becoming a friend at our kitchen table, it's like sits down, a glass of water with us on occasion. Hello, begins to shift. I know it's shifting me a lot, and I'm curious, how is this shifting you? This engaging this challenge of cancer, both as a practitioner, human being, as well as an artist. You just performed this weekend.
Yes, in a play about death. Gosh, yeah. Even the language around it, you said, you're overcome. I'm not going to overcome cancer. That's not going to happen. There's no cure. And they've been, the doctors have been very clear, that I have stage 4 prostate cancer. And they said there is no cure. We can't do surgery. We can't do radiation because, it's kind of all over my body. And all we can do now is buy time. But it's going to get me in the end. But I don't know. It's odd. I've been a little cavalier about death. That's easy to do when you're young. And so now, I don't know. I just feel like it's something that happened. And, it's going to happen to everyone. We underline this in this play so much, so I've got my own skin in the game when I'm doing that play. But I feel pretty accepting of it. I will go through all the treatments, and in some ways, it's just sharpened my perception of everyday life now, remind myself carpe diem, to enjoy everything, my wife and family, and the good health that I still enjoy in spite of having cancer. So, and I do think, mindfulness has absolutely helped this, and I'm so glad I've been, going pretty deep into it for the last 6 years in the sense of seeing what's real, and not trying to avoid it, accepting it, being with it. And so, I'm just going to enjoy life.
Yeah. Well, I wish my audience could see your face because it's so beautiful. Your joy is pretty obvious. But for me, the thing that's happening as death becomes more, even in this conversation, the thing that is deepening for me is sadness. Not sadness from the point of view of, oh, gee, this is sad, or it's depressing, or life sucks, or anything. But I think of all those, I walk graveyards a lot. Mm-hmm. And I spend my time stopping and reading a few, and I think of this person whose life, meant so much to someone, to themselves. And there's a sadness in this. Not maybe the word Chris, sadness is maybe not the right word, but there's something about the ephemeral quality of everything. And it has kind of a deep loneliness to it in a way that makes life more meaningful for me. It doesn't take the meaning out of it. If anything, it amplifies it. But, I'm sad that my mom and dad are gone. And I'm sad.
You think back, right? The story you told right at the beginning of this, and the Buddha, he said about those insects just being plowed in a field. Really? Gosh, that's amazing. Being sad about, I don't know, what I think is really saddening and tragic. I mean, we know that children get cancer, little children, and that makes a person sad. But, I'm 72, about to be 73. I've had a great life, and I just refuse to be sad about it. I don't know, maybe I hope I'm not fooling myself, but...
Yeah, no, that's good. And again, I'm not using sadness in the sense that it ought to have been otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm using sadness at how deeply I love my mom and dad. How deeply I feel about those bugs in the field. You know what I mean? So, in any case, thank you for sharing with us your insights.
Sure, yeah. I've enjoyed talking to you very much.
Well, I got one final question for you.
Okay.
I got one more. I got one more for you. And I try to end all my conversations on this final question. Again, as I said earlier, Chris, this podcast is about how we meditators, do this discipline. I mean, to many people, sitting still for extended periods of time is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you and I, that's what we do. And many of us more and more people are doing it every day. And the key question is how does that apply to our lives? And what does it do? And this has been a great conversation with you about it. So my final question is what three pieces of advice do you have for people, our audience, or anyone who hears this conversation in the future about meditation and bringing it into your life? What three pieces of advice would you have for them?
Yeah. I mean, I guess you assume that anybody listening to this podcast is already at least interested. And so, I'd invite them to investigate it, two, get started, and three is not give up.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for this conversation. I'm a very fortunate man that I get to have conversations like this with someone like you. So I really thank you.
Yeah.